Taeyang stood at the entrance of Galactic Academy Station Theta 7 with his single bag clutched in both hands. The station stretched above him like a metal mountain, all gleaming towers and impossible architecture. Ships from a 100 worlds came and went through the docking bays. He had never seen anything so big in his 17 years on Earth. Around him, other cadets walked past in groups. They were massive, a creature with 4 arms and rocky purple skin laughed with its friends, each one twice Taeyang and LT Uncan GT's height. Something that looked like a walking mantis clicked its mandibles at him as it passed, its black eyes showing clear amusement. A cadet made of living crystal simply looked through him as if he wasn't there at all. Taeyang pulled his bag closer and walked toward the registration hall. His footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Everyone else seemed to know where they were going. They moved with confidence, with purpose. He just felt small. Registration officer was a reptilian creature with yellow scales and cold eyes. It looked at Taeyang's documents for a long moment, then made a sound like a hiss mixed with a laugh. Another human, the officer said. Its voice sounded like rocks scraping together. First one in 200 cycles. Your kind usually knows better than to come here. I passed the entrance exams, Taeyang said quietly. He tried to keep his voice steady. Barely, the officer replied, checking its screen. Lowest combat scores we've ever accepted. Your species has no natural weapons, no armor, no venom, soft skin, weak bones. Tell me, little human, why should you be here? Taeyang swallowed hard. Because Earth deserves representation. Because someone has to start. The officer made that hissing laugh again. It printed out his room assignment and schedule, then slid the papers across the desk. Quarters in Section D, that's the waste reclamation level. Your equipment locker has the old training gear nobody else wants. Try not to die in the first week. It creates paperwork. Taeyang took the papers and walked away. Behind him, he heard the officer telling its colleague about the soft one who thought he could survive military academy. His quarters were exactly as promised. Section D smelled like chemicals and recycled air. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a small desk. Water dripped somewhere in the walls. Through the thin door, he could hear the louder cadets in the better sections above, their voices booming. Through the station, he sat on the bed and pulled out his tablet. A message from his mother waited. We're so proud of you. Show them what humans can do. Message from his little sister. Don't let the aliens push you around. Message from his best friend back home. You're insane, but you're brave. Don't die. Taeyang smiled despite everything. Then he changed into his training uniform and headed to his first combat class. The training hall was enormous. Obstacles and weapons lined the walls. Cadets were already warming up, moving through exercises that looked impossible. The Drexel cadets lifted weights that must have been A000 lb. The VIN moved so fast they were almost blurs. The Karu stood in meditation, their crystal bodies humming with energy. Taeyang found a corner and started stretching. His muscles were sore from the 3-day journey through space. He was tired, he was scared, but he stretched anyway. Look what we have here, a voice boomed across the hall. Taeyang looked up to see a Drexel approaching. The creature stood almost 9 feet tall, its body covered in plates of natural armor. Its eyes glowed orange. This was Core, and Taeyang already knew his reputation from the Academy files. Kor had never lost a training match. "The prey species has arrived," Kor said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Hall grew quiet, all eyes turned to. "Watch. Tell me, soft thing, what do you eat? Plants? Do you chew grass like livestock?" "I eat regular food," Taeyong said. He stood up even though Kor towered over him. "Same as anyone, same as prey," corrected. He leaned down until his face was inches from Taeyong's. His breath smelled like sulfur. "Your species has no claws, no fangs, no poison, no armor. You are walking meat. You know what my kind does with meat?" Taeyong didn't answer. "We eat it," Kor finished. The other cadets laughed. Even the instructor, a serpentine creature named Veller, seemed amused. "Enough," Veller said, but there was no real authority in his voice. "Take your positions. We're running combat drills." The drills were brutal. Taeyong was paired against a Vin cadet. For speed training, he lost in 3 seconds. He was paired against a Karu. For strength training, he couldn't even move the weights they used for warm-ups. He was paired against a Drexel for endurance training, and while he lasted longer than expected, he still ended up on the ground gasping for air while his opponent hadn't even broken a sweat. By the end of the session, Taeyong's body was covered in bruises. His uniform was torn. Blood ran from his nose where someone's elbow had caught him during a group exercise. Veller called him over as the other cadets left. "Human," the instructor said, "I will be honest with you. You don't belong here. You are going to get hurt badly, perhaps permanently. I suggest you request transfer to administrative studies. There is no shame in recognizing your limitations." Taeyong wiped the blood from his face. "No, sir, I'm staying." Veller's expression didn't change. "Then you're a fool. Dismissed." Taeyong walked back to his quarters in Section D. Every muscle hurt. His head pounded. Doubt crept into his thoughts like poison. Maybe they were right. Maybe humans didn't belong here. Maybe he should quit while he still could. Then he passed a window looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Home, everyone watching, everyone hoping he couldn't quit. On the first day, Taeyong reached his room and collapsed on the bed. Tomorrow would be harder, he knew that, but tomorrow he would show up anyway. That was all he could do, show up and keep trying. No matter how many times they knocked him down. Outside his door, he heard Kor's voice talking to other cadets. "The human will be gone within a week. Want to place bets on which day he breaks?" Laughter followed. Tiang closed his eyes and waited for sleep. Tomorrow, he just had to make it to tomorrow. 3 weeks passed like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Every morning, Taeyong dragged himself from bed, his body a map of bruises and cuts. Every morning he went to training. Every morning the other cadets looked surprised that he was still there. The mocking had evolved. At first, it had been loud and obvious. Now it was quieter, more cruel. Cadets would accidentally trip him in the halls. His food would be knocked from his hands in the mess hall. His equipment would go missing, forcing him to train with broken or damaged gear. Kor had made Taeyong his personal project. At least once a day, the massive Drexel would find some reason to humiliate him. A push here, an insult there, always just barely within the Academy's rules. Always just public enough to remind everyone that the human was at the bottom of the hierarchy. But Taeyong kept showing up. On the 23rd day, Velker announced a major training exercise. The entire first-year class would be dropped into the station's wilderness simulation chamber. It was a massive environmental dome that could recreate any hostile planet in the galaxy. The exercise would last 3 days. Cadets would be placed in squads of 5, and they would need to survive, hunt, and return to base camp with minimal supplies. This exercise has a 40% injury rate. Velker informed the assembled cadets. 10% require medical intervention. If you are dying, activate your emergency beacon. We will retrieve you. Maybe the weak will be exposed. The strong will prove themselves. His eyes lingered on Taeyong when he said weak. The squads were assigned. Taeyong found himself grouped with 4 other cadets, 2 Vin, 1 Koru, and 1 Drexel. None of them looked happy about being paired with the human. The Drexel, a cadet named Vorth, made his feelings immediately clear. Don't slow us down, pray, Vorth said. If you can't keep up, we're leaving you behind. They were dropped into a simulation of a volcanic planet. The air was hot and tasted like ash. Rocky terrain stretched in all directions, broken by rivers of slow-moving lava and forests of crystalline trees that looked sharp enough to cut in the distance. Something howled. The squad moved out quickly, too quickly. Taeyong struggled to keep pace over the rough ground. His shorter legs couldn't match the strides of the others. Within an hour he was falling behind. Within 2 hours the gap had grown to 50 m. Keep up, one of the Vin chittered back at him. Taeyong tried. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs felt like they would give out. But the gap kept growing. That's when the creatures attacked. They came from the lava rivers, things that looked like salamanders made of living rock and fire. They were fast and hungry. The squad scattered. The Koru used its energy shields. The Vin used their speed to dodge. The Drexel used brute strength to fight back, and in the chaos they ran. They regrouped 200 m away, counting their members. 4 Vorith said, we're missing the human. He probably got eaten. One of the Vins said, we should keep moving. We're supposed to stay together. The chorus said, though its voice lacked conviction. He was slowing us down anyway. Vorth decided, we move on. If he survives, he can find his own way back to base. They left. Taeyong heard them go as he hid inside a narrow cave wedged between 2 rocks, too small for the creatures to follow. The salamander things circled outside for an hour before finally leaving. When silence returned, Taeyong crawled out. He was alone. His communicator had been damaged in the fall when he dove into the cave. His emergency beacon was somewhere in his pack, but the pack had been lost when he'd run. He had no food, no water, no tools. He had 3 days to survive and find his way back to base camp alone. Taeyong looked at the ash-covered sky and made a decision. He wouldn't die here. He wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The first day was about water. He found it in the crystalline trees where condensation collected in the hollow spaces at dawn. It tasted strange but didn't kill him. He drank carefully, rationing every drop. The second day was about food. He watched the local creatures, learning what they ate. He found a type of moss that grew near the cooler lava flows. It was bitter and made his stomach hurt. But it was calories. He ate it raw, forcing it down. The third day was about the predators, the salamander creatures. Hunted in patterns, they came out when The temperature dropped in the evening. They followed heat signatures, so Tiang covered himself in ash and mud to mask his body heat. He moved during the day. He hid at night. He didn't sleep much. Just brief moments when exhaustion overwhelmed fear. He made traps from broken crystal branches using techniques he remembered from survival videos back. On Earth, he caught small creatures. Things that looked like lizards. He ate them raw because he couldn't risk a fire. They tasted terrible. He ate them anyway. His hands bled from handling the sharp crystal. His feet were covered in blisters. His lips cracked from the heat, but he kept moving toward where he thought base camp should be. On the fourth day, he stumbled into the clearing where base camp stood. Other cadets were already there resting and comparing stories. They looked clean and well-fed. They'd had supplies. They'd worked together. They looked up in shock when Taeyang emerged from the tree inn. He was covered in ash and dried mud. His uniform was in tatters. He limped on injured feet. His eyes were sunken from dehydration and lack of sleep, but he was alive. The human survived, someone whispered. Vor stood up, anger flashing across his face. You were supposed to die out. There, Taeyang walked past him without responding. He found a water station and drank deeply, his hands shaking. Then he collapsed on the ground, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. The last thing he heard before passing out was a new voice, deep and resonant like rolling thunder. Interesting, the voice said. Very interesting indeed. When Taeyang woke up in the medical bay 6 hours later, he learned that voice belonged to Kael'vor, a legendary Asheran warrior who had arrived at the academy as a guest instructor, and apparently Kael'vor had been watching the entire exercise. A nurse told him something else. Kael'vor had requested him personally. Requested me for what? Taeyang asked, his voice. The nurse, a gentle creature with too many eyes, looked at him with something like awe. As his student, no one refuses Kael'vor. He's the greatest warrior in the known galaxy. Taeyang lay back on the bed, his body hurt everywhere. But for the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt something other than fear. He felt hope. Outside the medical bay, he could hear cadets talking in hushed voices. Story had already spread. The human had survived alone. The human hadn't quit. The human had made it back through sheer stubbornness. Maybe they were starting to see him differently. Maybe he was starting to see himself differently. Tomorrow he would meet Kael'vor. Tomorrow everything might change, but tonight just slept a deep, dreamless sleep earned through survival. Kael'vor stood in the private training room when Taeyang arrived the next morning. The Asheran warrior was even more impressive in person than in the stories. 8 ft of pure muscle covered skin like polished obsidian. His eyes glowed with molten gold light. Scars crossed his arms and chest, each one a story of survival. When he moved, it was with a predator's grace that made every other species look clumsy. You're late, Kael'vor said without turning around. The medical bay kept me for extra scans, Taeyang explained. They wanted to make sure I didn't have any internal damage from the I didn't ask for. Excuses. Kaor turned to face him. Those golden eyes studied Taeyang like a specimen under glass. I asked for punctuality. Try again tomorrow. Yes. Sir, tell me something human. Why didn't you activate your emergency beacon? Taeyang blinked. I lost my pack. In the fall, the beacon was inside. No, Kylivor walked closer. Each step seemed to make the room feel smaller. You had a backup beacon. Every cadet has. One built into their uniform collar. You could have pressed it at any time and been rescued, so I ask again, why didn't you activate it? Taeyong and LT Unk and GT's hand went to his collar. He felt the small button. They're hidden in the fabric. He had forgotten it existed, or maybe he had chosen to forget, because Taeyong said slowly, if I called for rescue, everyone would say I couldn't survive. They'd say humans are too weak. I had to prove I could do it myself. Kylivor stared at him for a long moment, then, surprisingly, he smiled. It was a terrifying expression on that warrior's face. Good, you understand pride. That's important, but pride without knowledge is just arrogance. Sit. They sat on the training room floor. Kylivor pulled out a data tablet and brought up images of Earth. I've studied your planet, Kylivor said. Do you know what makes humans unique in the galaxy? We're weak, Taeyong said bitterly. You're slow, Kaor corrected. Slow compared to the Vin, weak compared to the Drexel, fragile compared to the Koru, but that's not the whole story. Let me tell you what else you are. He swiped through images. Humans running across vast plains, humans climbing mountains, humans crossing deserts and frozen tundra. Humans are persistence hunters, Kylivor explained. Do you know what that means? It means your ancestors didn't chase prey with speed. They followed it for hours, for days. They tracked animals until those animals collapsed from exhaustion. A human can outlast almost anything. Taeyong leaned forward, fascinated. Despite himself, more than that, Kylivor continued, humans are adaptable. Your species lives everywhere on your planet. Desert, ice, jungle, mountain, ocean. Sure, no other species spreads like humans do. You eat nearly anything. You survive nearly anywhere. You adapt, but in a fight, in a direct fight, yes, a Drexel will crush you, a Vin will cut you down before you can blink, but that's because you're fighting their way. What if you fought your way instead? Kylivor stood and gestured for Taeyong to stand as well. Show me how you fight. Attack me. You're a legendary warrior. I can't. That wasn't a request. Attack me. Taeyong lunged forward, throwing the best punch he knew. Kylivor caught his fist effortlessly and held it. You fought like a Drexel just then. Direct force, that's not your strength. Try again, but this time think you're smaller. You're faster than you think. You can fit places I can't. You can think creatively. Show me a human attack. Taeyong stepped back and considered. He circled Kylivor, looking for openings. He feinted left, then dove right, going for the legs. Kylivor sidestepped easily, but there was approval in his eyes. Better, you're thinking about angles, about using my size against me. Keep going. They trained for 3 hours that first day. Kylivor didn't teach Taeyong to fight like an Asheron or a Drexel. He taught him to fight like a human. Use your endurance. Outlast your opponent. Make them chase you until they're exhausted. Use the environment. Set traps. Think 3 moves ahead. Every species has advantages, Kylivor explained during a water break. Trick is playing to yours. Your body heals fast for your size. Your mind adapts to new situations quickly. Your endurance is remarkable. These are weapons, Taeyong. You just need to learn how to use them. Over the following weeks, the training intensified. Kylivor pushed Taeyang harder than anyone had ever pushed him, but it was different. From the cruelty of Velar or Kor, this was the push of someone who believed Taeyang could be better. They ran endurance courses where Taeyang had to outlast simulated opponents. They practiced evasion drills where size and speed mattered less than stamina and creativity. They studied alien psychology and physiology, learning weaknesses that could be exploited. A Drexel's armor has gaps at the joints. Kelvor taught, a Vin moves fast but tires quickly. A Koru's crystal body conducts electricity. Every strength has a corresponding weakness. Learn to see both. One day, a human diplomatic ship arrived at the station. Among the delegation was young Su, an ambassador who had been born on Earth and had spent decades working in galactic politics. Kelvor arranged for Yang Su to meet with Taeyang. They sat in a quiet observation room overlooking the stars. Young Su was older, maybe 50, with gray in his hair and smile lines around his eyes. Kelvor tells me you're learning well, Yang Su said, but he also tells me you still doubt yourself, that you still see humans as inferior. How can I not? Taeyang asked. Everyone here is stronger, faster, better armed. We have nothing. Young Su laughed softly. Let me tell you a story. Back on Earth before we had cities, humans survived an ice age. Do you know how we were slower than the predators? We were weaker than they prey, but we were smarter. We cooperated. We used tools. We adapted. He pulled up images on his tablet. Cave paintings, ancient tools, maps showing human migration. Humans walked out of Africa and spread across the entire planet. We crossed frozen land bridges. We sailed across oceans in wooden boats. We climbed the highest mountains just to see what was on the other side. Every environment tried to kill us. None succeeded. But in combat, humans invented the spear, the bow, the trap. We didn't fight fair. We fought smart. Do you know what scares the galaxy about humans? Not our strength, our refusal to quit, our ability to come back from anything, our creativity in finding solutions. Young Su leaned forward. The other species here evolved on easier worlds. They had natural weapons or armor or speed. They didn't need to be as creative as humans. But you come from a death world called Earth. Your planet tried to kill your ancestors for millions of years. They survived anyway. That's in your blood. The words settled into Taeyang like seeds finding soil. That night he stood in front of the mirror in his quarters. The bruises were fading, the cuts had healed. His body was harder now, strengthened by weeks of Kelvor's training, but more than that. His eyes looked different, less afraid, more determined. The next morning, at regular training, Kor approached with his usual sneer. Still here, Prey? I thought Kelvor's training would have killed you by now. Taeyang looked up at the massive Drexel and smiled. Not yet. Want to find out why? Kor's eyes narrowed. Something in Taeyang's tone was different. Something had changed. The human wasn't backing down anymore. Careful, soft thing. I might take you up on that. I'm counting on it, Taeyang replied. Around them, other cadets had stopped to watch. Word had spread about Kelvor's private training sessions. Everyone wondered if the human had actually learned anything, or if he was still the same weak prey. Soon they would find out. Taeyang could feel it. A storm was coming, and for the first time he was ready to face it. The challenge came 2 days later during morning assembly. Every cadet stood in formation in the main hall while Instructors gave announcements about upcoming exercises and policy changes. Taeyang stood in the back row as always, keeping his head down and his attention forward. Then Kor's voice boomed across the hall. I formally challenged the human called Taeyang to an honor duel in the grand arena. Every head turned. Silence fell like a hammer. Veller slithered forward to the center of the hall. This is unusual. Cadet Kor, what are the grounds for this challenge? He insulted me, Kor declared loudly. He suggested I was afraid of him. I demand satisfaction. The duel will prove which of us is superior. It was a lie, of course. Taeyang had said no such thing, at least not in those words. But the challenge followed academy regulations. A formal challenge couldn't be refused without admitting cowardice. Veller's eyes found Taeyang in the back row. There was something like satisfaction in that gaze. Do you accept this challenge, human? Every instinct screamed at Taeyang to refuse. Kor was 3 times his size with natural armor and strength that could crush steel. This was suicide, but if he refused, he would be labeled a coward. His training with Calver would mean nothing. Humans would forever be seen as prey, too afraid to fight. I accept, Taeyang said. His voice was steady, even though his heart hammered in his chest. Kor grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. 3 days from now, the grand arena, we fight until one of us cannot continue. Those are the terms. Agreed, Taeyang said. Assembly ended in chaos. Cadets crowded around Taeyang, some offering encouragement, most just wanting to get a close look at someone who would be dead in 3 days. Betting pools formed immediately. The odds were 100 to 1 against the human. Calver found Tiang in the training room an hour later. The Asheran warrior said nothing at first, just looked at his student with those molten gold eyes. You know this might kill you, Calver finally said. I know. You know he's stronger, tougher, and better armed than you. I know that too. Then why accept? Taeyang met his teacher's gaze. Because someone has to show them we're not prey. Someone has to stand and fight. If I die, at least I die trying. Maybe that means something. Kylivor nodded slowly. Then we have 3 days to make sure you don't die. Get on the mat. We have work to do. Those 3 days blurred together. Calver drilled Taeyang relentlessly on Drexel physiology. The armor plates had gaps. The species had tremendous strength but limited flexibility. They were built for direct combat, not for prolonged battles. They tired faster than they wanted to admit. You won't beat him with strength, Calver explained. You beat him with time. Make him chase you, make him swing and miss. Every missed attack costs energy. Every wasted movement tires him. You outlast him. That's the human way. They practiced footwork until Taeyang's legs burned. They practiced reading attack patterns until he could predict movements before they happened. They practiced falling and rolling and dodging, turning weakness into survival. On the final night, Kylvor sat with Tiang in the quiet training room. Tomorrow, you'll step into that arena, and every eye in the academy will be watching. Most of them want to see you lose. Some want to see you die. Do you know what I want to see? What? I want to see a human fight like a human. Win or lose, show them what your species is made of. Show them why Earth produces survivors. The day of the duel arrived with gray morning light. Taeyang, dressed in simple training clothes, no armor, would wear his natural plates. Taeyang would wear nothing but determination. The grand arena was a massive circular space that could be reconfigured for different combat styles. Today it was set to basic configuration. Flat ground, a few obstacles, nowhere to hide. Thousands of cadets filled the stands. The noise was deafening. Taeyang walked into the arena from one entrance. Kor entered from the opposite side. The size difference was staggering. Kor looked like a walking tank. Taeyang looked like a child. The referee, a floating orb with mechanical voice, announced the rules. This is a formal challenge duel. Combat continues until one participant cannot continue or surrenders. Medical teams stand ready. Participants take your positions. They stood 30 m apart. The arena fell silent. Even the breathing of thousands seemed to stop. Begin, the referee announced. Kor charged immediately, exactly as Calvor had predicted. The massive Drexel crossed the distance in seconds, his fist driving toward Taeyang's head with enough force to shatter concrete. Taeyang wasn't there. He dove right, rolling across the ground and coming up. In a sprint, Kor's fist hit empty air. The Drexel spun and charged again. Again, Taeyang evaded this time, jumping over a low obstacle that Kor had to go around. The crowd murmured. Human was running. It looked like cowardice, but Calvor, watching from the instructor's section, smiled. For 5 minutes, Taeyang did nothing but evade. Kor chased him around the arena, growing angrier with each missed attack. The crowd started booing. They wanted a fight, not a chase, but Taeyang watched carefully. Kor's breathing was getting heavier. His movements were slightly slower. All that mass took energy to move. The armor plates that protected him also weighed him down. At the 6-minute mark, Kor was visibly tired. His swings were wilder, less controlled. That's when Taeyang changed tactics. He stopped running and faced Kor directly. The Drexel grinned through his exhaustion. Finally, the prey was going to fight. Kor swung a massive fist. Taeyang didn't dodge. He stepped inside, the swing getting close where Kor's reach worked against him. Taeyang struck at the gap where armor plates met at the elbow joint. It wasn't a powerful hit, but it was precise. Kor grunted in pain. They separated. Kor charged again, but Taeyang was already moving, striking. Another joint, another gap. He was like a mosquito, never staying still, always finding the weak points. At 10 minutes, Kor was breathing hard. Sweat poured down his armored plates. He'd landed one glancing blow that sent Taeyang rolling. But the human got back up and kept moving. At 15 minutes, Kor's attacks were slow and predictable. Taeyang had mapped his patterns. He knew when the next swing was coming before Kor did. At 20 minutes, Kor dropped to one knee. His arms hung at his sides. He could barely lift them. Taeyang stood 10 feet away, bleeding from a dozen small wounds, but still standing, still moving, still ready. Yeah, Taeyang said quietly. Kor looked up with hatred in his eyes. But he couldn't stand. His body had given everything it had. I yield, Kor finally said. The arena exploded. Noise, shock, disbelief. The human had won. Taeyang collapsed to his knees, his own exhaustion finally catching up. Medical teams rushed forward for both fighters. Then Kavor entered the arena. The crowd fell silent again. The legendary Asheron walked to where Taeyang knelt and pulled out a ceremonial blade. Without a word, he cut his own palm, letting golden blood pool in his hand. Then he offered the blade to Taeyang. Do you know what this means, Kaor? Asked. Taeyang took the blade with shaking hands. No, sir, this is the ritual of kinship, blood shared his. Family recognized. I offer you my blood, and ask for yours in return. By this act I name you kin before all who watch. Tiang cut his palm, human red. Blood mixed with a Sharon gold as they pressed their hands together. Kael'ver's voice rang out across the arena. Let the galaxy hear this. Humans are not prey. They are hunters. They are survivors. They are the species that refuses to break. This human outlasted a warrior. Bred for combat, he did it with endurance, intelligence, and will. These are human weapons. The galaxy forgot what that means. The galaxy forgot that humans are persistent hunters who never stop. Today we remember. The arena was silent for a long moment. Then one cadet started clapping, then another, then the sound built like a wave until thousands were applauding. Taeyang looked up at his teacher, blood still dripping from his hand. Why, he asked, why did you really choose me? Kavor smiled. Because 300 years ago, a human stayed on my home world during a plague. He could have fled like everyone else. Instead, he stayed for months, helping my people survive. He called us kin when no one else would. Today I returned that honor. They left the arena together. Teacher and student, Asheron and human, bound by blood and respect. Behind them, the cadets whispered a new story. A story about the human who wouldn't break. A story that would spread across the galaxy. A story about why you should never count humanity out. News of the duel spread through the galactic network like wildfire. What started as a local academy story became something much bigger. Video footage of the fight was shared across 1,000 worlds. Analysis broke down every move, every decision, every moment where the human refused to quit. The betting houses that had given 100-to-1 odds suddenly found themselves paying out fortunes to the few who had believed in Taeyang. But the real change happened at the academy itself. Tiang walked through the halls the next day expecting the same hostility, the same mockery. Instead, he found silence, not the cruel silence of being ignored, but the respectful silence of warriors acknowledging another warrior. A Vin cadet nodded to him in the mess hall. A Kordu stepped aside to let him pass without making him walk around. Even the instructor who had dismissed him as prey approached him after combat. Class, I was wrong about you, Veller said simply. His serpentine eyes showed something new. Respect. I let my prejudice blind me to your potential. I formally apologize. If you're willing, I would like to learn from you. Human combat philosophy is clearly something I need to understand better. Taeyang blinked in surprise. You want to learn from me? Yes. The way you fight, the way you think about combat, it's different from anything we teach here. Different. Can be powerful. Will you teach me? I'm still learning myself, Taeyang said, but if you want to train together, I'm willing. Word spread quickly that Veller was training with the human. Other instructors took notice. Within a week, Kael'ver's private training sessions had expanded to include 12 cadets from various species, all wanting to understand human-style combat. 1 month after the duel, Earth sent 3 more humans to the academy. Taeyang met them at the docking bay. Haywin was a tactical genius who had graduated top of her class at Earth's military academy. Dongmin was an engineering Prodigy, who had designed improvements to standard spaceship engines, and Jiu, the medical student who had befriended Taeyang months ago, had completed her training and returned as an official academy physician. You started something, Taiwan said, grinning as she shook Tiang and LT Unc and GT's hand. Every human kid who dreams of the stars now thinks they can make it here. You showed them it's possible. I just survived, Taeyang said. That's exactly the point, Dongham added. Humans survive, that's what we do, you reminded the galaxy of that fact. They walked through the academy together. Other cadets watched but didn't mock. Some even seemed curious. The humans weren't prey anymore. They were unknowns, and unknowns demanded respect. Kael'ver gathered all 4 humans in his training room that evening. The Asheran warrior looked at them with those golden eyes that seemed to see everything. Galaxy has operated on certain assumptions for thousands of years. Kaor began. Strong species rule, weak species serve, predators dominate, prey hide, but humans don't fit these categories. You're not strong like the Drexel. You're not fast like the Vin. You're not protected like the Koro, yet you survived every threat your world threw at you. He pulled up a star map showing human space, tiny compared to the major empires, but growing steadily. Do you know why I truly chose Taeyang? Kael'ver asked. It's an LT Lunk and GT, a story I haven't shared publicly. He showed them an image of an Asheran world, beautiful, but ravaged by old scars. 300 years ago, a plague swept through my home world. It was devastating, 90% fatality rate. The galactic community quarantined us. They wouldn't risk exposure. Trade ships stopped coming. Aid ships stopped coming. We were left to die alone. Kael'ver's voice grew softer, touched with old pain. But one ship came anyway, a human merchant ship captained by someone named Marcus Chen. He had no reason to risk his life. He had no obligation to my people, but when he heard we were dying, he came. The image changed to show an old human man standing with Asheran children. Marcus stayed for 7 months. He brought medicine, he brought food, he helped organize care for the sick. He worked himself to exhaustion every day. When other species called him foolish, he said something I'll never forget. Nobody should die alone. If I can help, I will. By the time he left, the plague was contained. Millions of my people lived because one human refused to abandon us. Kael'ver looked at Taeyang. When I saw you in that survival exercise, alone and abandoned by your squad, I saw Marcus. You could have called for rescue. Instead, you survived through pure determination. That's the human spirit. He showed my people. That's why I chose you. I owed humanity a debt. More than that, I recognized kinship. The room was silent for a moment. Then Hewen spoke. So what happens now? We train, we graduate, and then what? 3 or 4 humans in a galaxy of trillions doesn't change much. It's a start. Kael'ver said, every great change begins with small steps. Today there are 4 humans at this academy. Next year there might be 10, the year after 20, and with each human who graduates, the galaxy's understanding changes. You become harder to dismiss, harder to mock, impossible to ignore. Dongmin nodded thoughtfully. We're not trying to conquer anyone. We're just proving we belong here. Exactly, Kaor confirmed. Humanity doesn't need to be the strongest. You just need to show you can't be broken. That's a different kind of strength, and it's one the galaxy desperately needs too. Remember, the weeks turned into months. Taeyang's squad graduated from first year. Status, Corps surprisingly sought Tiang out one day and offered a gruff apology. I underestimated you. The big Drexel said that was my failure, not yours. You fought with honor, I respect that. They wouldn't be friends, but they weren't enemies anymore either. That was progress. Haiwan excelled in tactical simulations showing that human strategic thinking, creative, flexible, willing to break rules, could outmaneuver more rigid alien approaches. Dongmen's engineering improvements were adopted across the Academy fleet. Ju and LT Hunk and GT's understanding of multiple species biology made her invaluable in medical emergencies, and Taeyang continued training with Kael'vor, but now as less of a student and more of a partner. They developed new combat techniques that blended a Sharon directness with human persistence. Other species took notice. Some wanted to learn, some remained skeptical. But nobody mocked anymore. 1 year after Taeyang first arrived at the academy, he stood at the same entrance where he'd felt so small and afraid, but this time he wasn't arriving. He was greeting new human cadets, 6 of them fresh from Earth, and terrified of what they'd find. Young woman named Min looked up at him with wide eyes. Is it true, the stories about you fighting that Drexel? Taeyang smiled. It's true, but I didn't win through strength. I won by refusing to quit. That's the human advantage. We don't break. What if we're not as strong as you? A boy named Ta Min asked nervously. You don't have to be, Tiang assured him. Every human has the same advantage I do. Endurance, adaptability, creativity, the ability to keep going when others would stop. That's in your blood. You're from Earth. That means you come from survivors. This academy will try to break you. Don't let it. Keep showing up. Keep trying. That's all I did. Jiu joined him as they led the new cadets to registration. You're good at this, inspiring them. I'm just telling them what Kael'vor taught me, what Yangsu taught me, what this whole experience taught me. Humans aren't prey. We never were. We just needed to remember that. That evening, Taeyang stood with Kayor on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Asharan warrior placed a heavy hand on his student's shoulder. You've changed this place, Kayor said. The instructors approach combat differently now. The cadets question old assumptions. That's your legacy. Our legacy, Taeyang corrected. You taught me everything. I taught you techniques. You taught yourself belief. Those are different lessons. They watched a ship depart for Earth, carrying news of the Academy's changing culture. More humans would come. The trickle would become a stream, then a flood. Humanity was claiming its place in the galaxy, not through conquest or domination, but through simple, stubborn persistence. Do you regret it? Kael'vor asked, coming here, all the pain and mockery. Taeyang thought about that first day. When he'd felt so small, he thought about the survival exercise where his squad abandoned him. He thought about facing Core in the arena, certain he might die. He thought about all the bruises and cuts and moments of doubt. No, he finally said, I don't regret any of it. Every hard moment made me stronger. Made humanity's position stronger. Someone had to be first. I'm glad it was me. Marcus would be proud, Kael'vor said softly. The human who saved my world would see his legacy in you. The same refusal to quit. the same determination. To prove your worth, the same stubbornness that makes humans so remarkable. Taeyong smiled. Stubborn, I like that. Put that on humanity's galactic profile. Stubborn enough to survive anything. They already have, Calver said, and there was warmth in his voice. Every species now knows, don't underestimate. Humans, don't expect them to break. Don't assume they're prey. Because humans are the species that walked out of caves and reached for the stars. That kind of determination doesn't lose, it just finds different ways to win. As the stars shone above them and the academy hummed with life below, Taeyong realized something important. He'd come here to prove humanity belonged, but in the process he discovered something deeper. Humanity didn't need permission to belong, they just needed to show up and refuse to leave. That was enough. That had always been enough, and now, finally, the galaxy was beginning to understand.